minutes after 8. This morning, for the last part of our special Americana series, our own Steve Fox is here to tell us all about one of his very favorite assignments, right, Steve?
I'm not sure I'd put it that way. Back in 1981, I did a dumb thing. A really dumb thing, it turned out. I agreed to take part in something called the Great Arcata to Ferndale Cross-Country Kinetic Sculpture Race. A truly absurd event. My teammates were dressed in tuxedos and French-made outfits. Our vehicle was a 2,000-pound bus whose propulsion and steering systems broke down right after the start. Over the next 3 days, as the other racers sprinted ahead across 37 miles of hard road and soft sand and floated across 3 stretches of open water, we dragged that bus. Afterward, I vowed never to do it again, but then came 1982, and yes, I weakened, only to find that, yes, the bus still didn't work. The weather last year was ridiculous, ranging from bad to awful and averaging miserable, especially on the 3rd day, when we had to cross a creek swollen to flood level by rains and whipped by 60-mile-an-hour winds. When we got to the end, after the spectators and the other racers had gone home and the finish line itself had been taken down, I was determined not to return. Ever. No! All right, okay. I know it sounds like a broken record. No, I'm not going back. But this year, I was determined to avoid the race. Determined. And I thought I had until a few days before it was scheduled to take place. The thing that made me suspicious was nobody was pressuring me to do it again. Not my producer, Tom Ryder, not the people on my team. Nobody. And most suspicious of all, Good Morning America, oddly enough, sent me to Northern California on the weekend of the race to do some totally unrelated stories, they said. Like they said in the old cowboy movies, it was quiet. Too quiet. My keen reporter's instincts were aroused when on landing in San Francisco, I was approached by 2 erstwhile thugs.
I left my suitcase on the plane. Let me just go get it. I'll get you for this.
The guys turned out to be perspiring young actors whose job was convincing me to attend an unnamed event that weekend. A prospect that conjured up ugly, even painful images.
It's for the glory.
Quick action was necessary, namely escape.
What is that?
Finally, I had to agree with their logic, which was there were 2 of them and 1 of me. Soon I was boarding a plane headed for Eureka, home of the annual agony that is the Kinetic Sculpture Race.
What a kind of guy.
On the day the race began, I knew I was in trouble from the moment I first put on this year's team uniform, designed with a loose Irish theme in mind. Then I got my first look at our entry, all 58 feet, 3,000 pounds of it. As my spirit sank, Hobart's optimism soared.
I like who's your tailor.
You want to begin the lies now? Tell me it's not going to rain.
It's not going to rain. Is this racing weather? Is this racing weather, I ask you?
Tell me the gear system, the propulsion's going to work.
Oh, brand new.
Despite Hobart's assurances, I was positive we would never be able to finish the race with this vehicle. And it turned out that most of my teammates from last year, those same stalwarts who swore they'd be back, felt the same way and had decided not to participate.
It's too big.
It's too big.
It's
Great.
too big.
That's terrific. That's what I need to hear before we start this thing.
You're going to love it. I don't know if it's going to make it or not, well, I'll tell you that for sure.
A quick glance around showed me that most of the other entries this year were designed both creatively and functionally. It looked like many of them had a chance to finish. And at 12 noon, they dashed across the starting line, already jockeying for good position on the course. We, meanwhile, reverted to our traditional start and began making repairs.
This is not a breakdown.
No, not a breakdown.
No,
That's a failure to start. It ended up taking us slightly more than half an hour to reach the starting line, which was downhill. Hobart, there are glaciers in Alaska that move faster than this. Once again, the other racers were far ahead of us, struggling through the sand dunes, which always provide the toughest challenge of the first day.
What speed! What determination! What endurance!
By the time we got to the sand dunes, it was obvious that once again we were going to have to drag our entry over the entire 37-mile course, our traditional kinetic stroll. But if the bus of years past amounted to a 2,000-pound brick, this year's beast was more like a 3,000-pound combination tractor-trailer and erector set, which tended to buckle in the middle and often threatened to break completely in half. How about assessing our trip so far?
Maybe bigger isn't better.
A lesson to be learned. The true test of day one was Dead Man's Drop, a steep 150-foot slope which tried both the design of the vehicles and the courage of the racers. Rather than simply riding the beast downhill, my team decided, graciously I thought, to allow it to pull us along behind. Thus, in true Northern California style, sharing the experience of the descent. Practically nobody except Hobart actually expected us to make it down Dead Man's Drop intact. So afterwards, spirits were high, briefly, until the inevitable happened, and our beast snapped in half along the center support struts. As the rest of the racers finished for the day, we went back to doing what we do best, making repairs and bemoaning our fate.
Glad you're back, Steve?
Never again. Well, I know I said that last year and the year before, but this time, I mean, come on, this is not safe. This is not reasonable.
Day two began with everybody else dashing across the starting line. Our pace, in contrast, was more dignified, sedate perhaps. A 58-foot ship of state, 1/3 of a city block long, tall enough to blot out the sun. Ahead lay the Humboldt Bay crossing, to most another obstacle, to us a potential disaster. To my amazement and delight, the beast did in fact stay afloat, though just barely. By now, a good number of racers had made it to Crab Park, where we would camp overnight, seeking comfort, companionship, and, in our case, condolences. Far behind came the beast, moving through dry, desolate landscapes that prompted one team member to suggest a new TV series called Little Mobile Home on the Prairie. It was hard to decide if the rain of last year was worse than the heat and dust of 1983. But I couldn't help but notice that as the task got tougher, the complaints grew fewer, and the folks on my team simply dug in and bent to the task at hand.
If you start it, you should finish it, definitely. Everybody who starts anything should at least see it finished or accept the fact they didn't do it. Taking on a difficult thing is climbing a mountain, and it's doing something that's impossible. And the beauty of this whole race, this is really classic, the beauty of this race is the problems in it. When we solve the problems, we climb the mountain.
The morning of the last day, as the racers lined up to cross the creek and begin the final 7-mile push into Ferndale, some of them reflected on what this event is all about.
Every year I feel like it's a big challenge just to make my body do this.
We like blisters.
Why am I doing this when it'd be easier for me to stay at home and beat myself with chains? For the glory.
Just try to see if you can beat Mother Nature.
At high noon, as we once again took the plunge, I realized that this race amounts to golf for crazy people, complete with water hazards and sand traps, and a demanding but essentially meaningless effort, which, if accomplished with style, produces great satisfaction, as it did for us, when for the first time ever, we made it across that creek under our own power, then dragged that beast through the mud up onto the bank. As we once again stopped to make repairs, this time welding parts together using barbed wire found alongside the road, I couldn't help but notice something that's impressed me for the past 3 years. The willingness and ability of the women on the team to do more than their share of the hard physical work the race demands.
You really get a chance to enjoy camaraderie, I think is a better word for it. This is better, a genetic mix, so we can have the proper children for the next generation
Oh, my Lord,
of kinetics.
What a concept. They're quarantined this part of California.
I'm thinking farther than Hobart.
As we headed into the Eel River, the weather turned bad, another race tradition. On the far side, other racers were hauling their vehicles up a 15-foot mud slope, struggling and tired, but also aware that the end was near, and in fact, at the Ferndale racetrack up ahead, the Flying Golumpke brothers were smashing through the finish line in first place, as they have 6 years in a row now. When we got there, hours later, an amazing and kind of touching thing happened. After being led to the finish line by a throng of children and supporters, we stopped short, got on board, and crossed under our own power.
to prove we could do it, even with Hobart in tow. The crowd was stunned, and so were we.
A true testimonial where so many spend so much to do so little.
See, the thing about this race is it doesn't just defy the laws of the race. It defies the laws of nature. Right. Physics. Humanity.
Oh, Steve, you get all the good assignments.
Easy for you to say.
It's got to be great fun, though, isn't it?
No.
Not at all.
No. Well, it's a lot of work. You know, it's a great amount of effort.
How many pounds did you lose in those 3 days?
Not enough.
No, but really, you have to.
Yeah, the reason I have done this 3 years in a row now is because you can't help but love the people. And the event itself isn't bad.
David wants to go next year.
You're going next year? Please tell me you're going next year.
You gotta be kidding. I gotta tell you, that is one of the most wonderful pieces, I've seen. Just fabulous.
Really?
You, Tom, and all you crazy people that did it. It's fabulous. Thank you.
Better they than we.
I have good news, though. Very good news.
What?
I am, in fact, not doing it next year.
You sure?
Kathy is.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
No way. We're going to commercial now. And our next half hour is Susan St. James. Stay with us.